Hey, it's Dr. Cody Rall with Techforpsych. We're here in New York City this year for the 2018 Psychiatry Innovation Lab. In this video, we're going to hear from the Psychiatry Innovation Lab Humanitarian Award winner, Dr. Sean Christensen from Cognova, a company that is stimulating the minds of the elderly using something called Reminiscence Therapy. Stay tuned for his pitch and my candid interview with him afterwards. Thanks so much to our sponsors, including our main sponsor this year, Otsuka Pharmaceuticals.
Dr. Sean Christensen.
Thank you, Dina. Imagine your family member, your wife, your mother, your grandmother is one of 5.7 million in the U.S. and 47 million globally suffering from dementia. Like 16 million caregivers, you are struggling with the obligations that you must work through, and you are twice as likely to suffer depression. My training in psychiatry has taught me the importance of treating both the patient and the caregiver. And we're able to engage them with the help of one of our earliest team members, Alia Sadek. And my mentor, Dr. Victor Hirth, is Professor-in-Chief of Geriatrics at the University of South Carolina School of Medicine. With over 20 years of experience, he knows what institutions, caregivers, and patients need. Guidelines approved by the APA and recommendations from the Center for Medicare and Medicaid Services both emphasize caregiver health and the need for non-pharmacologic behavioral interventions that use patient-centered past experiences. Now, one way of doing this is reminiscence therapy. It has been clinically studied and evaluated through meta-analyses to improve mood and improve well-being both in patients and in caregivers. But one problem has persisted despite being in practice for over 40 years. How do we make it truly patient-centered and personalized when we take somebody through a general collection of photos, videos, or keepsakes? This is the inspiration for Cognova, an adaptive, online, interactive reminiscence platform that allows caregivers just to enter their patients' demographics, and then our intelligent algorithm takes them through a selection of links from our database from decades of popular media. Then, as patients view movie trailers, listen to music, or see photos that are relevant to them, when they see something familiar, we seize upon the potency of emotions, leveraging the structure of the limbic system to reach down deep and pull on the submerged sparks that can reignite a loved one. And caregivers are active in this process. This therapeutic reminiscence has them laughing and learning together. Each selection better personalizes the next. Then at the end, there's a curated content delivery system that can be accessed online or in print. The more they use it, the more extensive their collection. So, for facilities who need something potent for their residents, what's out there? Well, there's Memory Lane, which offers digital displays showing generalized media to groups of residents for about $198 per month for 2 displays. There's Music and Memory, pretty well known for the Alive Inside documentary. They provide personalized playlists to residents and education on music therapy to facilities for about $230 per month. And then, of course, there's Link Senior, perhaps the most well-known. They provide a computer with interactive software that's usable typically by one resident at a time for about $1,200 per month for the facility. But the question is, what do caregivers want and what do patients need? A study in 2010 on transitions to assisted living revealed that caregivers want engagement, they want involvement, they want education, caring staff, and they want meaningful, stimulating activities. And that's what Cognova offers. We offer engagement of the caregiver even at home. We offer patient-centered memories that are effective for them. We offer staff a quick ability to use interventions that are personalized rather than medication, and it's easy to use by anyone. Now, to build momentum, we have to get the word out. And we'll start by providing 6-month promotional activation keys to families and facilities. Whether a family gets the promotional key from us or from a facility, when they transition to assisted living, that lead conversion incentivizes facilities to pay our $20 per month fee. And this is only part of phase 1. First, we're going to reach out to local cause-based organizations through affiliate marketing. This outreach is already underway because there are organizations in our state who want to work with us. In phase 2, we will jump into building new features that allow for psychometric testing and also integrate enhanced caregiver reminiscence guidance and pursue national grant funding. Now, reminiscence therapy has been practiced globally. That's why we know that addressing the global market is critical. So we plan to develop an international product line. Right now, Cognova is a spark. We have a basic version. We have a provisional patent. We have a database. Innovation Lab, we need programming, data analytics, and promotions. So please help us become a supernova. Thank you.
Thank you. That was great. Can you say a little bit more about your go-to-market strategy? Are you piloting first, or are you going straight to market, and how will you be promoting? Just a little bit more information.
Of course. So we've actually had the opportunity to pilot test it in an assisted living facility in Columbia, South Carolina. So we've seen what works and what some of the pitfalls are. After speaking with them, they've actually reached out about wanting to bring us back with our new basic version. So we're going to start with promotional activation keys to that facility, and through an organization called Dementia Dialogues, we can reach out to caregivers across the state, give them promotional activation keys as well, just so they can start using it for free for approximately 6 months. The reason we chose 6 months is typically caregivers start looking at facilities between 6 months to a year before bringing a loved one in. So that gives them time to build their collection and also let the facilities use Cognova with the existing residents. Great question.
Are you looking to expand this into other languages as well?
Most certainly. That a picture's worth 1,000 words, and that's one of the coolest things. So we want to get multicultural from the standpoint of Spanish, German, Japanese, Chinese, and reminiscence therapy has been practiced across the globe. One of the first patients we were working with, we discovered she wanted to learn Spanish at the age of 80. Nobody knew. Her daughter didn't know. And after starting to go through that process, she was more engaged in the activities at the assisted living facility when they would count in Spanish with her. And it was fascinating to see.
We want to take the audience questions. Thank you. How will you manage copyright and licensing? How much will that impact your profitability?
That is a great question. So copyright and licensing, especially in this digital age, has gotten really complicated. And we most certainly want to adhere to the Digital Copyright Millennium Act. There have been several court cases that have covered this topic. One in particular is Perfect 10 versus Google back in the late 2000s. Essentially what we use is a process called inline linking, where we're not actually hosting any of the content. And sort of the conclusion from that court case was that as long as it's inline linking, you're not directly infringing in copyright, nor is there secondary infringement. In the long run, we want to be able to build a database with actual content that we're paying for the copyright for. So you can license from BMI or ASCAP for music. You can pay for licensing from NBC. You can use video footage from the American Library of Congress. So we want to slowly shift our way to having access to that type of media.
Great. Next question. How are you targeting caregivers from diverse ethnic backgrounds?
Also a great question. So actually you can see a version of the application online right now at stage.explorecognova.com. We look at 4 demographics starting out, sort of their age, their gender, their ethnicity, and where they're from. And ethnicity plays a huge role in the things that somebody finds important. From the standpoint of reaching out to caregivers in particular, we're counting on the resources that we're going to work with the cause-based organizations to reach out to those caregivers. As for independently, I'm not sure. That would be a great recommendation as to how we as a group can reach them one-on-one.
So maybe if someone wants to join you during team time, that would be appreciated.
That would be fantastic.
Yeah.
Hey, it's Dr. Cody Rall here with Sean Christensen from Medical University of South Carolina. We're doing the Psychiatry Innovation Lab this weekend. It's awesome to have you here.
Thank you. It's good to be here, Cody.
You have a really cool idea because it's using reminiscence therapy, and something that I'm in the military and we work with kind of a younger population, so I didn't get as much exposure to it in my training, but it sounds like you had a mentor that was pretty prominent in that exercise. So if you wouldn't mind just kind of explaining what it is, it'd be helpful.
Yeah, of course. So I can tell you a little bit about reminiscence therapy and sort of how I got introduced to it. And it started with my mentor, Dr. Victor Hirth. Mm-hmm. He's the professor-in-chief of geriatrics at the University of South Carolina, where I went to medical school. And when I was introducing him to this idea that myself and another colleague were working on, he mentioned that you could use digital imagery as a form of connecting patients with Alzheimer's disease to their past.
Yeah.
And that moment sort of set us on this path to reminiscence therapy. So that gets us into what reminiscence therapy is. And it's usually taking somebody's past experiences through photo albums, through music, through talking with family members, and then walking them through it almost in a conversational style.
Yeah.
So reminiscence therapy kind of arose out of this idea called life review,
yeah,
which was brought up by this guy Robert Butler. So he was a very prominent geriatrician back in the 50s, 60s, and when he published on it, it showed people that it's possible to introduce somebody with kind of declining cognitive function to their past, and
yeah,
it's a therapeutic process. And reminiscence therapy that sort of came out of that was
yeah,
using different forms of media, be it photos, videos, music, to connect somebody to things they used to love and then engage them in conversation to sort of revisit those experiences.
Seems like that process would be pretty labor intensive though, because you have to get the family involved and they bring the photo albums and all that kind of stuff. And I imagine where you're headed with your project is it kind of automates it almost. At least that's what I'm kind of picking up from the project. Is that true? Are you guys trying to kind of disseminate that process a little bit more and make it a little bit more intelligent technologically?
Yeah, you actually hit the nail on the head. It's a really laborious process to actually bring all of that stuff together, sort of collecting the media, collecting the photo albums, and training a family member sort of on how to do it. Mm-hmm. And typically, it's done either in individual or group settings.
Yeah.
And the results sort of vary depending on if it's individualized or in a group. Now, it's easier to do reminiscence therapy in a group because, going back to that laborious process, somebody is able to collect sort of generalized media that might be relevant to somebody who was born in the 60s and show it to several people who were born around the 60s and see if it has meaning to them.
Yeah.
We're taking that a whole step further and trying to collect a database of popular culture, popular media from the past century and even up to now, so that it's easy to find media that's relevant to somebody just by using an algorithm.
Yeah. It's so awesome how it's kind of like automated, but then it reminds me of, how Facebook, tracks what people like, right? And then they feed them stories that they kind of like. Is that kind of a similar idea? Just pays attention to what you like and feeds you more of that content?
It's interesting kind of bringing up how we figure out what somebody likes, because it is certainly selection sensitive.
Yeah.
What they've seen first and then what they see next does influence whether or not we show them something similar, either a movie or a game, 2 selections down the road, or if it's something from the same time period. So their selection history plays a role along with just sort of the basics of their demographics.
Okay, yeah.
So someone's age, someone's gender, someone's ethnicity, where they're from. We're considering adding more features like hobbies, employment, elements of who they are that could influence what they might be interested in.
Yeah. Kind of reminds me of like Pandora maybe, where you pick a song and they're like, here's some others like it, and you just like build your library over time. And I wanted to ask you about like the neuroscience of this, because thinking in depth about that, stimulated my imagination of like, what is that doing? Is it pulling information out of the hippocampus that hasn't been accessed for a long time and sort of bringing everything back online? Or what kind of studies have you seen that sort of support why it's so helpful for people to undergo?
So that's a great question, sort of the neuroscience of reminiscence therapy. And really, music therapy is where a lot of the fMRI, or functional magnetic resonance imaging, is focused right now.
Yeah.
And the fMRI studies for music therapy has sort of shown you get activation in the medial temporal lobe, which involves sort of the hippocampus, you've got the amygdala, you've got a lot of structures sort of on the inside of the medial temporal lobe. And those play a role in long-term memory, in particular episodic memory.
Yeah.
So episodic memory gets into what an experience was like for somebody. And if you can activate those regions using the auditory cortex and sort of the inferior frontal gyrus, which plays a role in like language processing with music, then you can help bring these dots together with an external stimulus, as opposed to if you rely just on the hippocampus for what's called like free recall. It's not that easy, especially so someone with Alzheimer's disease, one of the first parts of the brain that's hit is the hippocampus. And as the hippocampus is just essentially degenerating based on the accumulation of plaques, you have a lot more flexibility from using other regions of the brain to bring a memory back. So there's a lot of work in music therapy. There's not too much work in reminiscence therapy as a whole for fMRI. It hasn't really gotten that same sort of attention from the standpoint of how can we look at somebody's brain while they're seeing visual media and auditory media and talking about it, like going through that full emotional process.
What kind of improvements do you see with patients after they've kind of gone through this process? Is it better like decision making or better memory or better ability to do their daily activities? What all have you guys seen with reminiscence therapy?
So kind of the improvements that you see with reminiscence therapy, there's been a ton of studies on them. And it's interesting because the results vary depending on the size of the study, depending on if it's individualized, depending on its groups, and depending on how the reminiscence is actually done. Because that varies dramatically. And typically it's a focus on well-being. So they look at the well-being of the patient and they look at the well-being of the caregiver. And it's a focus on mood. So seeing how they feel. Are they more depressed? Are they less depressed? Are they more anxious, less anxious? And then there is some work into cognitive function. Now the thing is, the results in cognitive function aren't as strong. So it's not as statistically significant as some of the improvements we've seen with caregiver strain or caregiver well-being or patient mood, where you see sort of a reduced anxiety specifically with individualized reminiscence.
So the patient's mood gets a little bit better and that kind of reflects itself and the caregivers feel better too, and it's just a better care environment, I imagine?
So whenever you see a patient connect with something they haven't seen in like 70 years, the caregivers are sometimes the most astounded. So we've had opportunities to kind of trial this with folks in an assisted living facility in Colombia. And it's just so cool to see a wife and her husband, and the husband has dementia. And she knows he likes cars. She remembers that whenever they started dating and when they got married. They've been married for 30 years. But whenever we're going through the application and showing him pictures of old cars, he lights up and he talks about cars. His face lights up, he smiles, he's engaging, she's engaged with him. We had another person who we discovered wanted to learn Spanish. Her daughter didn't know she wanted to learn Spanish. We didn't know she wanted to learn Spanish, but she randomly saw something that was in Spanish and started singing out of nowhere, Bésame mucho, which means to kiss me. And from there we went down this rabbit hole where we were trying to learn Spanish together, and I think she was like maybe, so there are certain HIPAA laws about the age you can say somebody, so I actually can't say her age because she's above that age in South Carolina. But she was old enough to where she had a moderate cognitive impairment, and she said to us, I thought I was too old for this. She thought she was too old to learn Spanish. And from that day forward, whenever they would do exercises with her, they would count in Spanish for her, and she was more engaged in the exercises.
That's awesome.
It was fascinating. It's the warm and tinglies, and that's really why I want this to grow, is so I can spread that.
I mean, that's the fuel that you need to like get through the entrepreneurial process, right? And I was gonna kind of ask you about that, where you guys are at and what that experience has been like for you in trying to build this program and talk to hospitals. How has that gone for you, and what advice do you have for people that are trying to get in and do that type of thing?
Oh, wow. So advice for sort of starting from ground zero to getting maybe a little bit above ground zero. I think the first thing is finding people that you can connect with, and finding people who have similar ideas, but different ways of going about it. Using those differing approaches to build on the same idea. And then once you have a similar idea, finding people who have a position to make a difference, reaching out to them
Yeah.
and saying, look, this is what we want to do. How can we incorporate this into a pre-existing mission that you have?
Yeah, yeah.
And then once you find a mission that they have that your idea fits into, then you sort of adjust the idea a little bit to their mission.
Yeah.
And then find out who's interested in that mission outside of their circle.
Yeah.
And then engage those people.
Yeah, I love that. So you guys were able to kind of branch out from the academic setting into some clinical communities and start using it, it sounds like?
A little bit, yeah. We got to trial an early sort of version of it.
That's awesome.